Hello everybody, welcome back to another episode of The Casual Criminalist. As always, I'm your host Simon. Welcome. This one written by Matthew Markham. It's been a minute, Matt. I think I've actually got to it. It's not Matt's fault. It's just been a minute since I recorded A Casual Criminalist. I think I've got a couple of his in the pile. So that's to look forward to. Today, Christopher Harkins. Sorry, I thought it said Christopher Hitchens for a second. I was like, no. Glasgow's Tinder swindler. Okay, I've been to Glasgow once. And I never want to go back. No offense, Glaswegians. Glaswegians? No offense, Glaswegians, but I went to your city. And I can't even remember why I was there. It was like some university club conference or something. Anyway, I was there and I had a night over in Glasgow and I had to find somewhere to stay. So I stayed in like a youth hostel. And I stayed in many youth hostels in my youth, and this one was properly grim. It was in this giant building that was like 20 stories high or something, and it was just like still grim, and it was in this scary part of town, and I thought I was going to get stabbed. And yeah, Glasgow's not very nice.
I also like to live dangerously.
I remember just before I went on that trip, a friend of mine was at university at Edinburgh, and I was like, yo, dude, if you were in Glasgow, God forbid, where would you stay? And he was like, oh, dude, stay in this hotel. It's fantastic. And I looked it up online, and then I was just reminded of the difference in our financial situations. Because it's like £500 a night. And I'm like, dude, I'm not going to stay here. Anyway, let's jump in. For men, online dating sucks. That is not a weird tangent. That's the start of the script. I've never online dated. Online dating was definitely a thing when I was younger, when I was in my single days, but it was not like it is today. I never did it then, but there was no like Tinder. There was no, I don't know any of the others. Fishing something. There's a fish one. Is that Plenty of Fish? That's an old one. Bumble! It's like a bee, not a fish. Just before we continue with today's episode, you know that feeling the morning after drinks? No. What feeling are you talking about, ad read? I never know that feeling. I'd never be so drunk that I feel terrible the next day. What? The sluggish crawl to the kitchen, trying to remember what combination of pizza and poor choice. I don't like how true it is. Well, look, that's what Z-Biotics pre-alcohol probiotic is all about. Let me just tell you about it. It's the world's first genetically engineered probiotic designed by PhD scientists specifically to help with rough mornings after drinking. Here's how it works. Look, when you drink, alcohol gets converted into a toxic byproduct in your gut. And it's not dehydration, is the main reason that you feel, they say, off the next day. But I'll just be like, horrible. Pre-alcohol produces an enzyme to break down that byproduct. So just make it your first drink of the night. It's just this little bottle, and then you'll feel your best tomorrow. I've used it for nights out. I've experimented with it many times. And look, it's just cracking stuff. I was very skeptical about it, but it is... it just straight up works, and you can try it. There's a 100% money back guarantee, so if it doesn't work for you, you've literally lost nothing. Click the link below, you'll get 15% off your first order, free shipping, and a 100% money back guarantee. Doesn't work for you, they will refund you. No questions asked, just like I said. There's a link below, try it out, why not? And back to today's video. Okay, to be completely honest, online dating sucks for everybody because it has reduced what was once the main highlight of people's youths down to little more than an algorithmic meat market. However, the reason I single men out specifically is because most of the qualities that traditionally draw women's attention, confidence, social status, a sense of humor, are not easily advertisable on a dating profile, thus leaving only one real tangible draw: their looks. This is a problem because most men are famously a bit funny looking, a bit frumpy, wrinkling and sun-damaged skin, or are bald. Hey! You wouldn't say that to Jason Statham, would you, Matt? Every man who's ever used Tinder understands this, and most, regardless of the state of their hairline, hate it. I think Matt's got a full head of hair, if I remember correctly, so he's just making jabs at me. Hey! Oh, God forbid, this would be a misery. Like, I don't know. Dating just sounds like a misery, and like, everything going well, something I would never have to do again. But Jesus Christ, I would not look forward to it. Also, it's very time consuming. Like, I've got mates who are not married or not in like long-term relationships. And it's like the amount of time they spend thinking about dating and women and stuff like that is just like, I don't have time for that. I gotta work.
No matter what happens, you're not allowed to fall in love with me.
Every man who's ever used Tinder understands this, and most, regardless of the state of their hairline, hate it. Yet, these apps are increasingly becoming one of the only viable ways for couples to meet. Allow me to quote Dr. David Baker's excellent book, The Shortest History of Sex. What a coincidence! I wrote the foreword to that book. Check it out. Male dependency on dating apps has markedly increased, with a smaller number of men today willing to approach a woman that they don't know in public. A 2022 survey indicated that roughly 2/3 of men either would never do that or would feel extremely hesitant to do so. Well, it depends on the setting. Like, I guess it's different than it was a time ago because there weren't Tinder and stuff. But if you're in a bar, or I don't know, like a university setting or whatever, you know, where there's clubs and all of that stuff, I don't know, I'd just be like, hey, how's it going?
Charming.
Because, you know, you're in that environment. But, like, in a non-appropriate environment, obviously not. Doesn't it depend on the environment? The dominant reasons for reluctance: fear of being perceived as creepy, fear of rejection, or being generally more shy, introverted, or simply polite. Meanwhile, women have increasingly begun to view being approached by a stranger as a red flag. With this mindset in place, most men don't have many options left. Yet there is one very big way online dating is undeniably worse for women: safety. I also imagine, isn't it just like miserable just getting constantly harassed by dudes in DMs? Like, I'm a middle-aged, average-looking dude, and I get harassed in the DMs. I don't go in there. Don't send me DMs. And I can only imagine what it's like for attractive women. Like, what the f***? It must be a nightmare.
No. Yes.
Who are you really talking to on the other side of that screen? You have no idea. It could be your soulmate, it could be a digital Ted Bundy or Ed Gein looking to gut you and turn you into a lamp, respectively. These are thoughts that rarely pop into any man's head when considering meeting a woman in person for the first time. But women have always got to be on guard. They always have to be aware that even if it's not someone looking to physically harm them, it could always be looking to someone to take advantage of them in other sinister ways. Yeah, dude, I don't know. If I was a woman, I'd be like, we got to meet in public like 7 times before I meet you in private. You might recall fairly recent headlines about the 50-year-old French woman named Anne who fell in love with Brad Pitt. I do remember this. After Brad Pitt's mother reached out to her on Instagram to say, Brad needs a good woman like you in his life. Okie dokie. You've got to be extraordinarily gullible, right? But that's the thing. Like, she probably sent like 1 million emails. And she gets 1 reply because there's one really gullible person among 1 million. For those unfamiliar, this woman started then talking with Brad Pitt over Instagram and WhatsApp, formed a relationship with him that lasted more than 1.5 years, and was planning to marry him once his impending divorce from Angelina Jolie was finalized. But before that last part could happen, Brad Pitt told Anne he needed to borrow some money. Why? Because his kidneys were failing, of course, and he needed dialysis and a transplant to live. Wait. Hey Siri, what's Brad Pitt's net worth? Jesus Christ, I don't believe you, Siri. It says $400 million. Did he sell like a tequila brand or something, Siri? Oh wait, it's not ChatGPT, it's not going to do that, is it? Of course not, because yeah, why didn't he just pay for it with his $400 million? Well, that was because his money was tied up in courts due to that pesky ongoing divorce. I mean, I don't, that's kind of pocket change for him. He probably just has that in cash. He's just got a few mil in cash, just for, bits and pieces. If I had $400 million in the bank, I'd probably just have $1 million in cash just to look at it. It's a big pile of money. Did he have proof of all of this? Well, of course he did. Here's a sampling of the many legitimate and totally not Photoshop/AI generated pictures of him in hospital, all of which were sent to Anne. Oh, wow. Yeah, AI is scary. These do kind of look real. Oh, it does look like Brad Pitt. I mean, the top right one, I guess you're seeing these on screen as well. That one looks like, Brad Pitt, something happened to his face. Pay particular close attention to the one in the bottom right corner. It's my favorite. It's a picture of Brad Pitt having surgery. Swayed by these heart-wrenching images, and then handed over her entire life savings of 830,000 euros. Good lord. I was like, who's doing this con for 1.5 years? How could it possibly be worth it? There you go. That's how it's worth it. How does someone so gullible have so much money? I feel like, no offense to this woman, obviously the scammer is the bad person here, but you've got to not be super sharp to fall for this, right? Am I being too mean? I feel like I'm being too mean. And then, but how do you get 830,000 euros? That's like $1 million. Because this situation is so ridiculous, you might be tempted to say you'd never fall for something like this, and laugh audibly as I did when first reading this story. But let's get serious for just a moment. When Anne discovered she had been lied to and taken advantage of, she attempted to take her own life. Then she attempted to do it twice more. Alright, now I feel like a douche. Which is fine. I mean, it's my normal state of being, so. And not only was Anne personally humiliated by having fallen for this scammer's lies, she was also financially ruined. And once the media began reporting on her naivete, online trolls began harassing her. Oh no, now I couldn't you have put this paragraph first, Matt? I'd have taken this a lot more not lightheartedly, but the opposite of lightheartedly, more seriously. I feel just like an online troll.
Oh my god.
Some even reached out to her in private messages, claiming to be the real bad Brad Pitt and seeking to apologize for what she'd gone through. Why would he have to apologize? It's not Brad Pitt's fault. These trolls then used this opportunity to try and extract more money from her while further mocking her. Others posed as FBI agents looking to hunt down the scammers for the same reasons. What's the FBI got to do with this? I know Brad Pitt's an American, but it's not Brad Pitt. It's probably some dude in Nigeria. Oh wait, no, it's probably a dude in Glasgow, isn't it? From the intro and all that. Unfortunately, while it's sickening, Anne's story is not unique. Online romance scams are becoming a huge industry, with the FTC estimating that over $1 billion had been lost to them in 2023 alone. And it's not just naive women being taken advantage of either. Sometimes it's smart, successful, independent women, such as the ones who fall under the spell of today's primary loser, Christopher Harkins. €830,000 is pretty good. Like, is he a criminal? Yes. But has he so far seemed to win at crime? Yes. I assume he gets caught because we know his name. Charming and handsome. It was 2015 when a single woman in Glasgow named Rachel began looking for love online. She was in her 30s by this point and hadn't had much luck meeting people in the various traditional ways. This was when her friend suggested she give Tinder a shot. Holy shit, has Tinder been around for 10 years? This was, her friend said, where all the fun single people congregated, a prospect that excited Rachel. Eager to put herself out there, Rachel set up a new profile, uploading pictures of herself, adding her general location, and writing out a biography that described her as a fun-loving sales representative for a luxury car brand. She then outlined her search criteria, indicating what type of person and relationship she was looking for: casual, serious, kids or no kids, smoking/drinking, etc. With this done, she then sat back and started exploring the other profiles, sorting through them in the typical swipe left, swipe right fashion. Before long, she came across Christopher Harkins, and it's not hard to understand what drew her to his profile. At 37 years old, Chris was physically very attractive, more so than most people in his and Rachel's age range. He was tall and muscular with long brown hair, a thick beard, and intense blue eyes. In most of his photos and videos, he posed at gyms, flexing and showing off his large biceps and quads. Just like showing off his quads in like some short shorts. Plus, he also had other things going for him beside his looks. He was also a bit mysterious. His profile just said he was self-employed, a businessman, and an entrepreneur. That sounds like... that I don't know if that's a going for you. Self-employed businessman, entrepreneur. I was like, what's that line from The Social Network? It's like, what was your last trepreneur or whatever? The girl expecting it to be like nothing, and he's just unemployed. And he's like, oh, it was Napster. It's Sean Parker. Oh, I love that. Based on my experience, that usually means one of two things: exceptionally successful or unemployed. Rachel assumed the former. You've got to assume the latter. It's like 95% are going to be unsuccessful, 5% are going to be successful, 1% are going to be exceptionally successful. Because I feel like self-employed businessman and entrepreneur, at some point you just put CEO or director or, I don't know, maybe I would put self-employed, a businessman, and entrepreneur. No, I'd put YouTuber. No, but then people know, oh no, this is tricky. This is why I don't fuck this. This is just a nightmare already. Rachel assumed the former, especially considering he'd shared countless photos of him traveling the world. They documented him in various countries throughout Europe, Asia, and the Americas. Curious to see if Chris was as interested in her as she was in him, Rachel swiped right, and to her surprise, a message appeared almost instantly. They had matched, and Chris wanted to take her out on a date. After chatting for a while and seeing no potential red flags, Rachel accepted, and plans were soon formulated for them to visit a Glasgow comedy club together in the coming days. When the date finally rolled around, Rachel found herself smitten. Chris was no catfish, as his already impressive profile seemed to sell him short. In person, he was a smart dresser and a perfect gentleman, kind, attentive, patient. In many ways, she felt upstaged by him because he was so charming and smooth and funny. As the pair got to know one another throughout the night, Chris revealed that he worked in finance, specifically with foreign currency exchanges. That is the most generic. Other than what you do, import-export, what do you do? Foreign currency exchange? It's like jobs that I don't know what they mean. He claimed to own his own business, which provided services for clients. Rachel had a vague idea of what this type of work entailed and didn't push for more details. Instead, she chose to focus on him as a person, getting to know his goals, his aspirations, his dreams. After leaving the comedy club, the pair went to a casino where they played cards and roulette. All right, interesting choice for a date. Casino? This is where Rachel was able to witness Chris's wealth in action, as he floated between tables, placing large bets and not seeming to care when they didn't go his way. Then at one point, toward the end of the night, he won big on the roulette table and split the winnings with her 50-50. He casually slid the money into her purse and told her to buy herself something nice with a wink. In Rachel's mind, that sealed it, and she would later tell her friends that Chris seemed like the perfect partner. Unfortunately, this initial gut instinct was about as far off as one could get. Chris was just an excellent con man. The first indicator that something wasn't quite right appeared in the weeks that followed this first perfect date, when Chris began attempting to exert control over Rachel in subtle ways. He tried to influence the way she dressed, the type, amount, and color of makeup she wore, when and if she wore nail polish, and so on. These attempts went beyond simply stating a preference. I'm like, oh wait, no, I'll tell my wife, but then I realized, no, just stating it. I don't like nail varnish and too much makeup and all this stuff. It's just not my vibe. And yeah, my wife knows that's my preference, but it's not like I force her. I'm like, oh no, am I a douche? It's like, no, you're just expressing a preference. And I think that's fine. And quickly began to encroach on obsessive control. When Rachel wasn't looking her best, he seemed uninterested or sometimes disgusted with her. Jesus. If she did something he didn't approve of, he would not hesitate to call her on it, requesting she do it in a different way to please him. Rachel says she also noticed Chris seemed extremely vapid and image-obsessed. One night, while the pair were out for dinner, Rachel paid the check for the two of them while Chris had stepped away to use the restroom. She did this without much thought because to her it wasn't a big deal. She was just picking up the tab so they could head out as soon as he returned to the table. However, when Chris learned what she had done, he was beyond livid. In the middle of the restaurant, he got in her face, warned her to never do that again, and took a hold of her arm, lifting her out of her chair and dragging her out of the front door in front of everyone. What the f*** is wrong with you? Just be like, oh, that's nice. Thank you. The only appropriate response. This humiliated Rachel, and she couldn't understand why he had reacted so negatively. He later revealed she had embarrassed him. As Rachel would quickly learn, embarrassing Chris was a cardinal sin. I just think it's nice. What's wrong? It's not the 1950s. You don't have to pay for everything. Now, after such a powerful reaction, you might think Chris's ego would never allow him to ask Rachel for money. But a few weeks later, he did exactly that. He called her and asked her if she would be able to transfer £800 to a friend of his who needed urgent help. He said he couldn't do it himself because his bank accounts were currently tied up in some sort of vague business dispute. Red flag. It's a vague business dispute. Dude, if you're running a business, I don't know, I've got many bank accounts. They're not all going to be tied up in some sort of business dispute. You just be like, oh no, or £800. Assuming he's as rich as he says he is, it is pocket change. Just go just take it out. I've got £800 equivalent in cash around for emergencies. Anyone with a little bit of money has cash around for emergencies. It seems he had no problem asking Rachel for money in private. Yeah, because it's not embarrassing him. I see the logic. Do I think it's insane? Yes. But I see the logic. Later, he also asked her to purchase new clothes for him, fancy dress shirts, slacks, shoes, etc. At this point, Rachel was not stupid and began questioning Chris's financial situation. After all, why would this uber-successful, self-made entrepreneur be asking her to buy basic things like clothes for him? But because she feared his potential reaction to this line of questioning, she didn't ask directly. Instead, she decided she would not give him any money the next time he asked, so she could gauge how he would react. This, she hoped, would give her some insight into Chris's true intentions, and oh boy did it. Let me guess, he's going to be pretty pissed. A few days later, Chris asked for money again, and Rachel agreed to transfer it, but she didn't. She then played dumb when he told her that it didn't arrive, saying it must have been a mistake on the bank's part. Chris didn't believe her and began spamming her phone with messages, saying he really needed her to send the money, but Rachel was determined not to send it. She stopped replying, and that's when the harassment started. Immediately, Chris began insulting her, calling her broke, a freeloader, attacking her appearance. He called her ugly. He said that he'd never really been interested in her, said that she had weird teeth. Rachel watched these messages roll in, and the realization settled over her. This was the real Chris, and he had been using and manipulating her for as long as they'd been together. Everything she had seen in him, the charm, the kindness, the optimism, had all been a means to an end. Humiliated, Rachel blocked Chris's number and moved on with her life. Excellent choice. Just be like, oh well, lesson learned. That sucked. What a douchebag. Move on with your life. Another woman, same Chris. Like Rachel, Laura was a professional from Glasgow who was looking for love online. She turned to Tinder because her job as a consultant didn't leave her much time at the end of the day for dating in person. At this point, she'd been single for about 3 years and was eager to meet someone new. And that's when Christopher Harkins first entered her life. Does Tinder have reviews? You know, like you can check your Uber score and it tells you like how good of a passenger you are. Can you check, do people have Tinder scores? So it's like you went on a date and like Chris would get a 1 star. And then you know, that would kind of make sense, right? There's some flaw in the logic here. Definitely, that I'm not seeing. But that would be useful in this situation. Just as he had done to Rachel, Chris presented himself as a successful entrepreneur. And Laura was very attracted to him. She described him to her friends as a bit like Jason Momoa with his long, wild hair and steely eyes. This prompted her to reach out to him, and after several weeks of talking on the app, they met up for an in-person date. Then they met up for a second date. Then they started planning a vacation to the Greek island of Mykonos together. Now, we all know how fast that sounds, and Laura's claimed she knew it back then too. But she also claimed she didn't mind moving quickly because she liked Chris a lot and believed he was just a spontaneous and fun-loving person. Yeah, I could believe this. Like, I don't think it's too outrageous. It's been a few weeks. You just be like, you know, if you're really getting along, it's a big romantic gesture. Like, as a dude, I don't think I wouldn't make that gesture. But as a woman, I definitely wouldn't take this dude up on it. Because it'd be like, no, I'm not leaving the country with you. That's weird. She wanted to be seen as spontaneous as well, so after taking a few days to iron out all the details, they finalized their plan. Because the relationship was only about 3 weeks old. Oh, okay, it's quick. It's not, I don't think this is some outrageous thing. Both Laura and Chris decided it'd be best if they split the cost of the vacation right down the middle. Chris then worked up an estimate and sent it to her. Exactly £3,247 each. Laura thought this sounded reasonable for a desperately needed vacation, so she eagerly transferred the money. A few minutes later, Chris sent her a screenshot of the hotel confirmation and told her to have a good night, relaying how exciting he was that the trip was going to go ahead. Giddy as a schoolgirl the night before prom, Laura then went to bed. However, that excitement would soon turn to shock and disappointment. The next day, Laura attempted to call Chris, but found his cell phone was switched off. This was highly unusual because Chris was always exceptionally attentive and responsive. Still, Laura tried to suppress her worry and trust that everything was just fine, that he was just busy with work or something. I feel like she must have transferred the money to like another UK bank account, right? If this guy's just going to run off with the $3,000, just go to the police. It's fraud. I'd just be like, here's his bank account number. No? It's not like she's transferring it in Bitcoin. Being busy with work was a concept that she knew all too well, after all. But she soon found it impossible to stop the feeling of uneasiness swelling in the pit of her stomach, which only grew worse the longer Chris continued to dodge her calls. Hoping to ease her mind, Laura placed a call to the hotel where she and Chris were scheduled to stay to confirm the trip had indeed been scheduled. This is when Laura was met with the ugly truth. They had no record of a booking under either her or Chris's name, and the invoice Chris had sent her was a forgery. For Laura, that was the moment the bottom dropped out. It was also the moment she got very, very angry. Determined to get her money back somehow, Laura called Chris several more times, and when he didn't answer, she took her concerns to her bank. She hoped they could reverse the charges, but because she admitted to willingly transferring the money to Chris for personal reasons, they were no help. It's fraud. If he had stolen the money, they said, they might be able to reverse the charges, depending on the situation, but as it stood, there was nothing they could do for her. Frustrated, Laura then contacted the police in Scotland, who agreed to have a sit-down conversation with her. Well, this is exactly the right, you're making all the right decisions so far. However, this too proved fruitless. Once again, Laura admitted to willingly transferring the money to Chris several days ago, and they saw the situation as a civil matter and advised her to seek restitution through other means, such as in civil court. Is this not fraud? You're dishonestly appropriating money from someone. I think that's like the definition of fraud. It's something like that, isn't it? I know Scotland's got a different legal system to England's and Wales, but it can't be that different. They did this because they didn't view Chris as a scammer and Laura as his victim. They viewed the whole situation as a spat between two lovers and told Laura they couldn't force her boyfriend to take her on vacation. He forged a receipt and sent it to her. All I can say to that is, oof. Indeed, Matt, indeed. Now, obviously, hitting roadblock after roadblock felt demoralizing, but Laura still wasn't done fighting. Over the next several weeks, she began gathering and organizing as much information about Chris as she possibly could. This is exactly what I would be doing. I'd be like, all right then, let's go. Because I'm a spiteful little bitch. Admittedly, there wasn't much about him online other than his dating profiles, so she took screenshots of their message history and held on to the fake hotel booking, preparing to take her case to court. At the same time, she kept attempting to initiate contact with Chris in a variety of different ways. If she could get him to reply, she had 2 goals in mind: ask him point blank for her money back, and failing that, collect some incriminating evidence. Surprisingly, Chris did eventually respond to one of her messages, but he only did it to ask for more money. The balls, my dude, the balls. Yes, that's right. When Chris finally replied after weeks of radio silence, he made up some garbage excuse for why he'd ghosted her and cancelled their holiday plans before promising to return the money if she helped him with something very important. She's going to see right through this, Chris, and going to get you in trouble. According to Chris, his business was going through difficult times and several of his vital financial accounts have been frozen. If your accounts are getting frozen, that's very serious, right? It usually, like, to have your accounts frozen, there's got to be a court order or whatnot, right? So you're in, it's happening. This isn't like, oh, yeah, no, you didn't pay for a contract. It's like more serious. On the advice of his lawyers, he couldn't give her too many details about exactly what was going on. It's convenient, but he stated that her money was safe. It was just tied up in one of those accounts. But there was good news. He had a surefire way to right the ship and get everything straightened out. It was really good. A foolproof plan, he asserted. All he needed was £12,000 for Laura to get back on his feet. If she didn't have the money, that was no problem. She could borrow it from her bank and he would pay it back later, plus interest. Having already decided long ago that Chris was a fraudster, Laura did not believe his story for a moment. Oh, please tell me you play along, Laura. You got to play along. Let's play along. There was no way on earth she was about to agree to something like that. However, she did decide to play along by pretending to apply for the loan and telling him that she got rejected because her credit score was too low. Her goal in doing this was to stay on Chris's good side by making him think all was forgiven as she continued to collect more evidence. Smart. Aggravated by her failure, Chris then began spamming Laura with links to other banks and loan websites that she could try. She then pretended to apply for those as well, once again telling him that she'd been rejected. At this point, he then suggested she take out a credit card in her name for him to use because the barrier to entry for a credit card was much lower than a loan. Indeed it is. Laura knew lying about the credit card would be difficult, so this time she told him she wasn't comfortable doing that. He stopped replying. In September, after several more weeks, Laura got aggravated to the point that she revealed she had gone to the police. However, she didn't tell him that they'd refused to help her, instead implying that they were looking to question him and possibly considering pursuing charges. Clever girl. This seemed to light a fire under Chris, and he quickly agreed to meet up and return the money so long as she agreed to cancel the police. All right. Excited, Laura then made plans to meet Chris at Glasgow City Centre that afternoon, but Chris didn't show. For some reason, ostensibly because he couldn't come up with the money, Chris left Laura waiting for him for several hours and would not pick up his phone when she called. For the next couple of weeks, Chris continued to string Laura along. Usually, he would not reply for days, and then he would offer a variety of weak excuses for why he seemingly dropped off the face of the planet and could not meet her at that exact moment, even though he totally did intend to return the money. Eventually, pinky promise. Once he claimed his phone had been stolen, and he had just gotten it replaced. Another time, he claimed to have developed amnesia after being in a bar fight and couldn't remember who she was. Dude, really? For as smooth as Chris is reported to have been in person, this was a comical level of ineptitude, and although Laura was certainly still upset about losing her money, part of me does wonder if she ever took a moment to stop and laugh at just how ridiculous Chris's stories were becoming. At this point, I would just be like, I just want to waste £3,247 worth of this man's time. I'll just be like, yeah, no, meet it up. I got the 12 grand. It's in you got to come to, what's the opposite? Land's End. Like the opposite end of the country. In one of his most outrageous fabrications, he actually claimed he had used her money to invest in a startup that had recently gone public. Since being listed on the stock exchange, a £3,247 investment had ballooned to over £32,000, and it was still growing. I mean, wait, this is a very quick turnaround. The longer she waited, he said, the more she would get back. When Laura accused Chris of lying, because of course he was, he then sent her a picture of a comically large pile of money saying, I have your money, before giving her another excuse about why he couldn't give it to her. To my dismay, I couldn't find a screenshot of this exchange online, but I'd like to imagine the photo was something similar to this screen grab from Breaking Bad. It's just them looking at a huge pile of money in that garage. Now, having been fed the largest crock imaginable, Laura decided to try another approach, reaching out to the media. The Evening Times. It should be noted, the only reason the public knows Christopher Harkins' name is thanks to the efforts of a UK journalist named Catriona Stewart. She was the first person to take Laura's claims seriously after Laura reached out to her in late 2019, and she would go on to write extensively about Chris's crimes in the coming years. She would also attend every day of his eventual trial and participate in an episode of BBC's Disclosure, which I believe is a bit like CBS's 60 Minutes. Oh my god, I know neither of those shows, but I can imagine what it's about. This is because, although we've only mentioned 2 women so far, her work would reveal that Chris had been pulling the same type of scam for over a decade, leaving a trail of financially devastated women in his path. He had also, as Catriona was about to learn, been committing much worse crimes for almost as long. Oh shit, what else has he been up to? However, I'm getting ahead of myself. For now, let's start with her initial investigation into Chris. After Laura reached out, Catriona was able to determine that Chris had 2 companies registered at a single address in the area. I mean, this is one of the first things, like, you have his name, right? And it does seem to be his real name. So you'd Google it, and in the UK, there's Companies House, which lists, like, all of the owners of companies. So you'll be able to see what he owns, and then they'll at least have a business address on there. It's somewhere to go. It's like gonna get you somewhere, maybe. She then ventured out to that address looking for Chris and spoke to a woman she believed was Chris's mother. She was not able to contact Chris that day. However, Chris did quickly contact Laura after he learned the media was sniffing around. This, it seems, frightened Chris, so he promised to return Laura's money so long as she cancelled the police and did not have the story published. Laura agreed to these conditions and ventured out to a restaurant in Cathcart where Chris said he would be waiting. Once again, he didn't show, but he did leave a surprise waiting for Laura. Her cash, all £3,247 of it, which was hidden in a spot for her to find. Chris texted Laura its location, and she was finally able to collect it. It seems he simply did not want to meet Laura while Catriona was present. Yeah, cannot blame him at all. That's exactly what you should do in that situation. Now, at this point, Laura could have just walked away and been content with having been made whole, letting Chris go as she'd promised to do. Get your money. And now just like, oh no, I was lying. I just wanted my money that you stole from me back, you douchebag. Now let's get this to press. She didn't know about the other women at this point, and there would have been no real reason not to. Spitefulness. I'd be like, this guy, let's go. He held onto your money for ages. You had to really push him to get it back. The amount of time wasted is extraordinary. But a small part of her wondered if perhaps this was not Chris's first rodeo. He was simply too comfortable lying and stealing. That suspicion pushed her to have Catriona release the article anyway. Hoping to influence the narrative before the public learned of his actions, Chris eventually agreed to talk with Catriona before the article's release, at which time he attempted to spoon-feed her a few lies that would hopefully muddy the waters. These conversations were briefly discussed at the end of the article that was released on October the 17th, 2019, under the title, "Warning, Charming Tinder Con Man Took £3,000 of my cash." Quote, "After 3 lengthy conversations with the Evening Times, Harkins insisted he held Laura's cash back because he was in fear for his life following death threats from her. He told us he had screenshots of the threats from Laura, but preferred not to share them with us. Harkins did not answer questions on why he had taken the money from Laura and denied having done the same thing to any other woman. He also strongly denied having asked her to take a loan out for £12,000, despite the Evening Times having seen screenshots of the conversation," end quote. Despite his protests of innocence and victimhood, Chris's smug face plastered on the front of the paper served as an invitation for his other victims to reach out to Catriona. Rachel was one of those people, and although her accusations against Chris were similar to Laura's, it soon became clear that Chris was guilty of so much more, as woman after woman accused him of violence and horrific sexual assault. This got grimmer than I expected this episode to get. Money and power. In America, Many documents pertaining to arrests, trials, and lawsuits that occur within most of the 50 states are readily available online. In many cases, you can even find warrants and entire court transcripts available as PDF simply by Googling the name of perpetrators. That goes double for federal cases where information is oftentimes even easier to find than state records because anyone with an account can simply search the public access to court electronic records or PACER, making my job exceedingly easy these days. Yeah, it doesn't work like that in the UK. But I've been informed by lawyer Liam Bird that the jolly old United Kingdom takes privacy a bit more seriously, especially when it concerns sex crimes and their victims. For this reason, many of the specifics surrounding Harkins's more serious crimes, such as exactly when and where they occurred and who was involved, are not available. Even Chris's trial itself was closed to the public, so sensitive testimony from victims could be given without fear of their identities leaking. The only reason we know so much about Rachel and Laura's experiences is because they chose to speak to the press under false names. And here's what we do know about the other women. First, it became clear that Chris was not stumbling across these women by chance. He had a system by which he carefully selected victims who he believed were most vulnerable, people who had just gotten out of bad relationships, who had just experienced a family tragedy, or who had few friends or relatives living nearby. One of the women stated she'd once given an interview to a newspaper after a sudden death in her family, prompting Chris to reach out for the first time mere days later. Another, a military veteran who had just returned from Afghanistan, stated Chris exploited the fact that she did not have a good support network because all her military friends were scattered around the world and her non-military friends had slowly drifted away while she was deployed. This allowed Chris to quickly become a prominent fixture in their lives and begin controlling them without having to first isolate them the way most abusers commonly do. One aspect of Chris's abuse that neither Rachel nor Laura had seen firsthand was his violent streak. Multiple women accused Chris of being very vocal about getting into fights, usually going into graphic detail about how he'd roughed someone up at a pub the night before for no particular reason, just because he wanted to. That is not something that is going to impress a woman. It's like, I got in a fight last night, beat the shit out of a guy. I don't think women are impressed by that. Chris would oftentimes use his size to physically block them from leaving or threaten them if they tried to go to the police for any reason. For the women Chris couldn't physically threaten, such as the military veteran, he used other methods, like secretly recording them performing degrading sex acts. He would then blackmail them when they got out of line, threatening to release the footage to their friends, family, and colleagues. For some, that could result in the deaths of their careers and reputations, a terrifyingly frightening prospect. Yet despite this, one woman stated that Chris thought this type of blackmail was very funny. She first realized what he was doing one night in bed when she turned around and saw his phone was out after she specifically told him she didn't want to be recorded. He had simply laughed off her concerns, making jokes about how her dad would feel if he saw those videos. Bruh. Furthermore, another woman who had met Chris in 2015 through Facebook said he oftentimes became aggressively violent in bed. One night while they were having sex, she told him to stop because he was being too rough, but he refused. She tried to push him away, but he wrapped his arms around her throat and just kept going. Well, bro, that be rape, my dude. She would later recount, it was his eyes. I've never seen anyone's eyes change like that before. His eyes went vacant and icy, and he was just staring into mine. I honestly thought to myself, oh God, I cannot believe this is how I'm going to die. This guy is going to kill me. After this, she broke things off with Chris, but she never felt safe in her home again because she was always worried that he might someday surprise her when she least expected it, sexually assaulting her, or worse. She says Chris used to vaguely threaten her by saying, be careful, you never know when someone might drag you into the bushes. Psycho, dude. Psycho. In total, over 20 women reached out to Catriona, 13 of which accused Chris of various physical abuses, 3 of which claimed he raped them. Of those 13 who claimed abuse, 9 claimed to have gone to the police at different times. All 9 had been brushed off or belittled. In one of the more egregious cases, the woman who claimed Chris had implied someone might drag her into the bushes said she often called the non-emergency line to request an officer be dispatched to escort her from her car to her apartment because she was so afraid of him. She called that same line so often that the dispatchers knew her by name. Many of them were very worried about her and did everything they could to keep her calm when she was at her most vulnerable, but the officers who came out to escort her were substantially less impressive. Quote, they were not interested in what I was telling them. They were absolutely useless. One told me my pet rabbit needed its nails cut. I remember thinking, the police can't help me. In between all this violence, Chris somehow still made time for his financial crimes. Some of the women who contacted Catriona had been swindled out of large amounts of money. 2 claimed to have given him over £70,000 over the course of their relationships, not a single pound of which had ever been returned. God damn, that's a different game than like £3,000. Chris comes tumbling down. Almost overnight, Catriona had enough information for an entire series of articles, but for our second one, she chose to focus on a woman who Chris had met and swindled after Laura's story had been published. I mean, you kind of think that, dude, it's time to quit. You got like fully busted, my dude. But no, he just carries on. This time she detailed how the woman and Chris had connected on Tinder, how they had gone on 4 dates, and how they planned to take a vacation together. It explained how she'd sent Chris £1,600, which disappeared, after which time Chris had asked her to take out an £18,000 loan for him. Thankfully, the woman had refused after learning about Chris's past by Googling Glasgow swindler. This had brought up Catriona's first article and revealed the remarkable similarities between her and Laura's stories. The woman had then confronted Chris, and his response had been to belittle her and deny everything. The following text messages were taken directly from Catriona's second article titled Glasgow's Tinder Conman Who Duped Woman of £3,000 Strikes Again. Quote, "Oh, don't tell me. The stupid story I was cleared of in all of 5 minutes of an interview. Think why I wasn't charged, you f***ing moron. I was cleared within 2 minutes and I have a case with them for defamation of character, you f***ing idiot. Since when does a newspaper tell the truth about anything? She reported me to the police before contacting me. Silly, silly girl." Gee, such a douchebag. That's just so unpleasant. At this point, the police finally took an interest in Chris. They reached out to Catriona to request that she not write any new articles until they had a chance to investigate. Catriona agreed, and multiple upcoming pieces were then shelved to avoid interfering with the police's work. Catriona also encouraged the women who had contacted her to file new formal complaints so their claims wouldn't slip through the cracks of the legal system. Many then did, and this is where Detective Chief Inspector Lindsay Laird and Detective Inspector Ian Renfrew from Police of Scotland Domestic Task Force step into our story. D.I. Renfrew saw Chris as the predator that he was and set out to bring him to justice. He would later tell the media, "It quickly became clear that this was not an isolated incident, but it was the modus operandi of a perpetrator who had been operating for a number of years and had been largely going unpunished." Because it was obvious Chris was still targeting new women, even after the police's investigation was launched, a charge for a single count of financial fraud was filed in London. This was done primarily to get him off the streets and give investigators in Scotland time to decide how to proceed with the rest of the charges, with the understanding that Chris would eventually face justice for the much more serious crimes. At the time of his arrest, Christopher Harkins was living under the name Christopher Harlins to avoid being connected with the 2 articles. He was then tried and found guilty, ordered to repay £8,000 and jailed for 15 months in London. This allowed Laura and the other women to breathe a collective sigh of relief, but the fight was far from over. How so? I feel like 15 months is, this isn't for abuse, this is for fraud. I feel like the abuse should carry a heavier sentence than that, but this is the £70,000, that's pretty major. It does feel a little bit light, doesn't it? But he did get jail time, that's a major thing. As the public learned of the police's consistent inaction over the prior few years, many began calling for accountability as well as an explanation. DCI Laird would attempt to give them one, and I'll summarize it this way. Basically, there were no established guidelines for investigating or prosecuting romance scams up until this point because the concept of a serial online romance scammer was fairly new. Most seasoned officers had never encountered repeated crimes like this, and not one of them had put 2 and 2 together because the reports were so spread out, both in terms of time and location. There were instances as far back as 2013 in Airdrie, Dumbarton, East Kilbride, Edinburgh, Glasgow, Paisley and Stirling. In each, the officers faced with a fraud complaint viewed as an isolated incident. They also viewed the claims of violence and assault as lovers' quarrels and didn't want to get involved. Jesus Christ, that is pretty bad, guys. That's not a good look. That's your excuse. It's like, oh no, they were lovers' quarrels. That doesn't make you look good. Often claiming the women who came forward had little to no tangible evidence to follow up on. To most, this explanation was wholly unsatisfactory, a feeling that was not helped after Police Scotland denied freedom of information requests for specific details about the cases. Their reasoning was that such information could prejudice law enforcement or cause distress to victims. To ease some tensions, they also stated these internal findings had resulted in the creation of new guidelines for investigating and prosecuting romance scams, including requiring continuous professional development or CPD for all officers as of autumn 2024. Chris's case would be the first in the country to be tried using these new guidelines. After serving 15 months, allowing time for over 24 victims to be interviewed, Chris was returned to Scotland to stand trial for the charges that had slowly been compiled while he was in prison. By then, it was May of 2024, and Catriona reported he was a withered man who no longer seemed imposing or intimidating. He looked pathetic, beaten, and angry. Recognizing the evidence of his financial crimes was so overwhelming, Chris quickly admitted to fraud totaling over £214,000. However, he refused to admit the sexual assaults or domestic abuse, opting instead to fight those charges to the bitter end. I mean, you can see why, right? Money, pretty easy to trace. Like, he's not doing this with some Bitcoin or shit. He's just putting in his bank accounts and stuff. There's going to be hard evidence for that. The other stuff, not so much. Easier to fight, right? At his trial, Harkins took the stand in his own defense, but this proved to be rather pointless after the court had just heard gut-wrenching testimony from the women who were brave enough to step forward and face him. The only defense he offered was that they were lying, he was innocent, and that he'd been railroaded by the police on trumped-up charges. Thankfully, this didn't work, partly because Chris was reportedly such an unlikable douchebag on the stand. He was found guilty of 19 separate charges, including assaulting a woman to the danger of her life, 4 sex offences, one of which was raping a victim while she was asleep, and common law assaults against 3 women. You are going to prison for a long time for that, my dude. As you f***ing deserve, you piece of shit. At his sentencing on July the 10th, 2024, Kilmarnock Judge Alistair Watson explained that because Chris had shown no remorse or acceptance of responsibility for the more serious charges at any time during or after the trial, he would sentence him to 12 years in prison. Well, yeah, to be fair, he is pleading not guilty. He would also order Chris's name to be added to the sexual offenders register indefinitely and give his victims protection from harassment, ordering Chris not to contact or come within 100 meters of them at any time or place forever. As Chris was being led from the courtroom, Catriona claims he turned to her and stated, "This is all your fault." No, mate. No, Chris. This is your fault, you incredible douchebag. Thus proving that the judge was more than right about his lack of responsibility. Chris has reportedly also written multiple letters to Catriona's employers attempting to get her fired for harassment. As of the time of writing this script, Chris will be eligible for parole no later than 2036, unless more charges are brought against him, which is still very possible. As reported by the BBC in January 2025, the BBC is aware of alleged frauds totaling a further £53,000 that have not been prosecuted and a further 9 alleged victims who were not involved in the trial. Yeah. And you know what? Oh, it's Scotland. I don't know. There's no statute of limitations in England for this sort of criminal crime. So, yeah, let's hope. Let's hope it gets to 2036 and they're like, guess what, bro? More prison time for you. Thanks for watching or listening. If you're listening as a podcast, why not leave us a review? Cheers.